Hi everybody, and welcome to webinar 3 in this series of 4 webinars. If you remember, the theme of the webinar is developing ball characteristics in 12 and under players. This is webinar 3, and today we're going to be looking at the green court and in particular at defending on the green court. You'll know by now, but I'd like to just remind you that this webinar is brought to you by an international partnership of private coach education companies. So that's Coach Central, the education brand of Inspire to Coach from the UK, of which I'm one of the directors, and also ETC, Evolving Tennis Coaching from Greece, and thirdly, Trio Consult from Bulgaria. Again, just to remind you of the journey we've been on so far, and hopefully you've had a chance to either join me live for the webinars or to watch them on YouTube as recordings, which you can still do, by the way. We've been through webinar 1 where we talked about the ball being key, and we talked about the introduction to the ball characteristics, and we looked at a few things connected to the red court in that one. Then we looked at the attacking game, or one specific aspect of attacking on the orange court, and in particular ball characteristics for patterns of play with the serve. And as I've just said to you tonight, we're going to be looking at the green court and defending, and I'll be talking a little bit about the impact of the change again in the size of the court and the ball characteristics for effective defense on the green court. Again, just to remind you from the last webinar, hopefully you have had a chance to think about what we covered in webinar 2, and hopefully to maybe just go through some of the tasks that I sent you in the email after webinar 2 that you've perhaps had a chance to work on with your players and think about as far as your coaching is concerned. But we talked about the changes between the red court and the orange court and the effect or the impact that these changes will have on the development of the game for young players. We looked at how to develop the use of key ball characteristics when developing the serve for simple patterns of play on the orange court. And then finally, I shared with you some videos of some simple drills that you can use to help your players using the serve to attack. And I hope you've had some success with that. I hope you've been able to think about how you can implement some of those ideas into your coaching. In this webinar, as I've already said, we're going to be talking about the green court, so I'd like you to think about how the increase in court size and the compression and speed of the green ball, and also the greater skill of the green player, will create exciting opportunities and significant challenges for ball mastery or control of the ball characteristics. Secondly, to understand how the different ball characteristics on the green court can be developed to create and use key defensive patterns in match play, and I'm going to be focusing on one specific aspect of defense today. And then finally, I'll share with you some ideas for some progressions that you could use on the green court to help players to master the ball characteristics which are needed to develop one aspect of the defensive game. So again, just to take you back to webinar 2, if you remember, one of the things that I said was very important was that we understand, first of all, the increase in the court size and what that means for the young players who are progressing from the red court to the orange court, but also that we understand the effect that that has on their game, both from a serving point of view and then also from a returning point of view. But I talked about the opportunities that exist on the orange court to be able to attack. And I told you about the increase in the court size, around about 93%. Obviously, that depends on how you mark out your red courts and also your orange courts. But if we look to the ITF sort of recommendations for red and orange court sizes, then the increase in the area in square meters is around about 93%. And that's quite a significant increase in the amount of court that the players have to cover with little legs, and it makes for some opportunities but also for some challenges for them because of the increase in the court size. And I also talked to you about what the increase in the length of the court increase of 7 meters in total from 11 meters to 18 meters, but obviously that's over two ends, so it's 3.5 meters at each end of the court in the increase in length. And we talked about that in terms of what that might mean for the serve, but also the opportunities that that gives to be able to attack. So that principle of understanding what it means when we increase the court size from red to orange is also true when we look at increasing the court size from orange to green. The same principles apply. The green court, as you well know, is bigger than the orange court, and therefore that has an effect on the players and the way that they play the game. So again, let's just have a look at the similar statistics. Again, this depends a little bit on how big you make your orange court. But if we go again with ITF recommendations on court sizes, then you will find that the increase in area is round about 68%. That's another 68% on top of the 93% increase from red to orange. We're now increasing by another 68% from orange to green. Similarly, the court is longer, and therefore we are looking at an increase at each end of the court of just under 3 meters. So these are really significant figures and will have a big impact on the way that the players play the game. I also think it's worth pointing out that when we talk about the players progressing from red to orange, it's quite normal that the kids will spend quite a lot of time, maybe several years, in the red court program before they move to orange. My experience of a lot of orange court programs around the world is that the time that the players spent on the orange court is actually a lot shorter and sometimes can be a year. I don't think that's enough personally, but I also know that these court sizes and progressions have to fit in with competition age groups and the way that competition is organized in different countries. So that creates a challenge, because it also means then that the players are going to a bigger, longer court with relatively little experience at the previous level, the orange level. And that also is significant, not just from an understanding of the game point of view, but also in the amount of time that they've had to grow, because if they are spending relatively little time on the orange court, then they don't have as much time to be able to grow and therefore to adapt physically as well as technically, tactically and mentally. But they don't have that much time to adapt physically to the increase in the court size when we move from orange to green. And these are all significant factors in what I'm going to be talking to you about tonight, and I think are things that I would recommend that you think about in terms of how and when you decide to progress your players. I showed you a similar slide last time in webinar 2, so I'm going to repeat the same slide. It's slightly different, as you'll see in a moment. But again, when we progress our players from orange to green, the ball is faster, and the greater compression of the ball, you can see there in the third bullet point, is really significant when it comes to forcing players on the green court to need to attack. And I'll come back to that in more detail as we go through. As well as being a faster ball on a bigger court, we've got players who are a little bit bigger, probably a little bit stronger, probably a little bit more experienced, and also are probably playing with a longer racket. And all of that means that the players are looking to hit the ball faster and further. And the easiest way for players to be able to hit a ball to go further is through a combination of height and speed. Remember, they're not adults, and they're not able to generate the increases in racket head speed combined with control that perhaps you or I could do. And therefore the trajectories that we tend to see on the green court are higher over the net, because one of the things that the kids are trying to do is to keep the ball deep enough to prevent the opponent from attacking. And of course, a higher trajectory with a greater ball compression and perhaps a little bit of topspin, depending on how the players are developing their game, means that we have some problems. And these problems are part of the real world of green ball tennis. And you may well have experienced that and seen that for yourselves with your players, both in training and also in competition. But this combination of height plus depth plus spin is a really tricky combination for young players, especially if they don't have the physical qualities to be able to deal with it. And that could be to do with how tall they are and also how quick they are and how well they move around the court. So athleticism and physical size are obviously going to help when we are asking players to move to a court which is bigger, dealing with a faster, higher bouncing ball, perhaps with a little bit of spin as well. So these are all things that the kids are really having to deal with, and I think we have to recognize as coaches to make sure that we understand the level of challenge that our players are going through when they are being moved from the orange court to the green court. Just to go back to the tactical framework, which I've shared with you on many occasions in these webinars so far, but what we're going to be talking about today is the neutral and defensive ground stroke. So therefore we're looking at the baseline game as the game situation. The phase of play, therefore, is defense in green. I haven't marked that one, but we're looking obviously at defending. So that could be trading or rallying, which is the more neutral form of ground strokes. But in particular, I want to focus today on neutralizing and staying in the point. And if you're unsure about the difference between neutralizing and staying in the point, it's really about degrees of defending. So neutralizing to me suggests that the players still have some control over what they are doing. They still have some control over their body, perhaps their balance, perhaps their stance. They're able to choose more of how they set up to play the shot, but they are still under pressure. They still are able to control the racket in a way which is going to allow them perhaps to be able to counter the attack of the opponent. So that would be neutralizing. Staying in the point is more extreme. Staying in the point is exactly what it says. It's when the players are under severe pressure. It's a good chance that if they have a requirement to stay in the point, that they are probably going to lose the point unless they defend unbelievably well, or of course unless their opponent makes a mistake. So staying in the point is more extreme and is also part of the real world. Remember, the green court is not just longer, but is also wider, and therefore there are more angles, and therefore the players are going to have to move and run greater distances, not just left and right, but forwards and backwards and in diagonals. So there is going to be quite a lot of extreme level defending that you will see on the green court. So the priority from a tactical point of view is, first of all, consistency and to learn to get every ball back, to make the attacking player play another shot as many times as possible, because obviously that increases the chances that they might make a mistake. And then once we've got the ball back, we need to be thinking about how we can control space. In other words, to keep the ball deep enough to stop the opponent attacking or attacking some more. And perhaps other things such as perhaps going to the middle of the court where we take away angles from the attacker, but also controlling space in terms of the defending player and their recovery and the positions they take up behind, on, or perhaps even inside the baseline from defensive positions. And of course, they need to be able to control time, primarily because when they're under pressure, they need to be able to give themselves time to be able to start to regain a little bit of control within the point. So the obvious thing to do when controlling time is to hit the ball higher, and that will give the players a little bit more time to be able to recover or to reposition. And of course, it makes the attacking player have to wait a fraction longer for the ball to come down again for them to be able to play their next attacking shot. Other examples of attacking could be in spin variations, and you can see in the bottom layer there the 5 ball characteristics, which are all important. So height is important when defending, direction is very important when defending, as is depth, and speed. Remember, speed is not just an increase in speed, but it could also be a decrease in speed. So an example of combinations of speed and spin could be height to give more time and also to slow the point down when defending. But also it could be, for example, using slice, for example, on the forehand, but also on the backhand, obviously, to be able to slow the trajectory and to be able to give the player a little bit more time in defensive situations. So There are a lot of different things to consider here when we think about it from a tactical point of view, and this is why it's so important that we are stressing all the way through these 4 webinars the importance of getting the players to understand and develop the skill of being able to control the ball characteristics. And this is why we've chosen this as the theme for the 4 webinars, because the thing that allows the player, just like the chessboard that I talked about in webinar 1, the thing that allows the player to be able to be in control within the point is their ability to do certain things with the ball. I also thought you might find this interesting. These are some heat maps that I did just very simply with pen and paper. So it's not a scientific study by any means. But what I find interesting here, if you have a look, is the comparison between the orange court and the green court. So just to explain, this is from 2 different matches, from 9 and under and 10 and under boys matches on an indoor hard court. And just have a look at this. Just take your time to think about what you actually see. Each of those dots is either a rally ball or a defending ball. So I haven't included the attacking balls. I haven't included the errors. All I've done is to mark out the position on the court from where the boys played either a rally shot or a defending ball. So have a look and you'll see the obvious thing, of course, is that the position of the shots on the orange court is much more concentrated, okay, much more close to the baseline, much closer to the baseline, less width, and there is less difference between the rally balls inside the baseline and the defending balls behind the baseline. Whereas if you look on the green court, the dots are more scattered, they're a little bit wider, so you can see 4, possibly 5 dots there that are inside the tram line. Of course, this is the position of the player, so these are wide balls, angles. These are not where the ball is bouncing, these are the positions of the player. And you can also see how many more balls the players are having to play from deep positions behind the baseline, okay, and how much they are scattered. So they're not all central. You can see, for example, how there are some clusters in the corner at the baseline, behind the baseline from defensive positions. So I just thought you might find that interesting. If you have time and you're interested in doing it, I'd suggest that you did something similar, and it would be interesting if you come up with similar results. This is done with a green ball on an indoor hard court compared to an orange ball on an indoor hard court. Would also be interesting to see how it might differ, for example, if you did the same thing on a clay court. But I just thought you might find that interesting, and I think it helps me to explain the importance of having to defend in these situations, because you can see how much more the players are being stretched around the baseline on the green court compared to the orange court. So, just to conclude this little section before we get to some videos which I'd like to show you. First of all, remember that the players have to be able to read the incoming ball. I've stressed the importance of receiving skills all the way through these webinars, and it's really, really important that the players continue to learn to read the incoming ball on the green court as well. Why? Because they need to give themselves time, especially to move back or away from the middle of the court. Generally, we see that players are better and faster moving left and right around the baseline, lateral movement. They tend to be much slower moving backwards. And therefore, it is very important that they recognize the height or the depth of the incoming ball so that they start to move quickly to a position, a more defensive position behind the baseline. So please continue to think about working on receiving skills and the player's ability to read the incoming ball from defensive positions. I think psychologically and mentally, the players have also got to understand that they are going to have to defend a lot on the green court, and therefore they've got to learn patience. They've got to understand the value of neutralizing and staying in the point. So there's some maturity that's needed here from the players. Up until now, probably on the red court and the orange court, they haven't had to defend as much as you saw from the heat map just now on the orange court. Psychologically, the green court makes the game a lot tougher, and there will be a lot of times when the players are just going to have to grind out points and are going to have to be patient and just play to keep the ball in court and to maintain a position, and maybe wait for the balance of the point to change through great defense, or perhaps for something to change because of a mistake from the opponent. So some mental skills are needed, and these are important lessons for our young players. Remember, these guys are only, depending on your country and your system, 9 years old, 10 years old, in some countries maybe even 8 years old. So these are very immature and inexperienced young children who are being asked to be mentally tough, and of course these are not easy things to develop. Players on the green court also have to be able to play off the back foot, and you'll see this in some of the videos that I'm going to show you. Think about why. Well, if you think about the speed of the game and the trajectory on the red court and on the orange court, the balls are not going as fast, and the balls are not bouncing as high or as fast. When we talk about the ball characteristics on the green court, and I talked earlier about the combination of height and depth and spin, then when we take into consideration the greater compression of the green ball, that means that the players are going to have to move back a lot. And by moving back, that means that they are not going to be able to get onto the front foot and to be able to transfer the weight forward. So it's really important that the players learn to be able to play off the back foot in defensive situations. And again, I'll focus on this in particular in a moment as we start having a look at the videos. But these are the type of situations that the players are going to have to learn to adapt in. Of course, working forwards, they're going to be able to look to get onto the front foot and transfer the weight when they're attacking, but they're going to have to switch between attacking and defending, and therefore going to have to switch between playing neutral balls perhaps off both feet, attacking going forwards with the weight going into the shot, and then defending with the weight perhaps falling backwards away from the court. So this is a real challenge to their movement and of course to their dynamic balance. And remember, these kids are not particularly strong, a lot of them. They're still quite small, so the head is still relatively heavy compared to the rest of the body. The neck muscles are not particularly strong, and when the head is rolling around when they're going backwards, that also really challenges their dynamic balance and their stability in defensive positions. So another thing to emphasize, as well as the back foot position, is also the width of the base, because that's what's going to be able to help them to be able to control their dynamic balance a little bit better. So there's some real challenges that are coming up for these players when they get pushed deep. Tactically, the players have got to understand the importance of height, depth and spin combinations in defensive situations. I've touched on that already. The players have to be patient, but they also have to be smart, and they can't hit winners at all times and from all parts of the court. Sometimes they just have to play for position. They have to play just to stay in the rally. They have to play until the phase of the point changes, perhaps from a defensive to a neutral or even an attacking phase. And therefore, they're going to have to select the right mix and combination of ball characteristics to be able to use in defensive situations. The players have also got to recognize when they've defended well, because by getting the good combination of height, depth and perhaps spin, that will not only keep the attacking player back, but it might even force them back themselves. So it is possible that there could be quite a quick transition from defense. So it could be that the defensive play very quickly becomes a rally ball, okay, with the two players or the defending player now able to play the next shots from closer to or on the baseline. Or it could even be that they defend really well to allow the player to be able to go from a defensive situation straight into an attacking situation in the midcourt. And that could be because of the effectiveness of the defense, or of course it could be because the opponent has made a mistake and has allowed the defending player to be able to transition straight from defense to attack. So the players have got to be able to recognize when they've defended effectively. They've got to make sure that their recovery is good enough to be able to take advantage of anything that might land short, but they've also of course got to be able to be prepared to play one defensive shot after another. So their recovery up to or close to the baseline might then mean that they have to go back again for another defensive ball, perhaps in the same direction or perhaps in the opposite direction. So they need to learn to recognize the transition between different phases of play. So I'm just going to show you here 3 typical points. As you can see, these are on a clay court, and so that will be slightly different to what you might see on an indoor or an outdoor hard court. And if we have a look at this little boy at this end in the 3 short videos that are coming up, I want you just to have a look at the pressure he is under. He's quite small. He's quite recently transitioned from orange to green, so he has a lot of work to do. But before I even play the video, if you just have a look at his physical size compared to the playing area that he's now playing in. So all of a sudden he starts to look very small, doesn't he? The court looks very wide. The opponent is a long way away. The net looks still pretty high. It's now, of course, at regulation height. And so the first thing is that this little guy and these little legs are going to have to work extremely hard in all directions just to be able to play this game. And so I'd like you just to have a look at the pressure that this guy is under in the next 3 short videos that are coming up. So here's the first one. So have a look how far he's gone off screen there because of the depth he's having to move back for his defense. Whereas the opponent is holding his position on the baseline a little bit more. Okay, so the first point here is that even though the return from this end was quite effective, quite high, quite deep, the server with ball 3 was pushing this little boy in the yellow, was pushing him right off screen, right off camera, because of the height, depth, spin combination that was forcing the bounce of the ball to push the opponent so far back. If we move on to the next video, this time he's serving, and again, just have a look at this one. Again, a really tough point for him. And again, look how far back and how hard he's having to work. He actually defends really well here, and he's a little bit unlucky, I have to say. I feel for him. He gets lobbed because, of course, they are so vulnerable at that size and that level at the net. I'm just going to play this one more time and just stop it at the key point. Although we're not talking about the serve today, I'd also just like to point out, because of the distance and the height of the net and his strength and his height, look how slow the serve is. This is a first serve, but look how slow the serve is and how hard he has to work to hit that serve that distance. So, but I'm going to stop it at the key point in the defensive phase of this point here. So in we come here. And if you have a look at that contact point there, it's just above head height. It's just above head height, and these are really tough situations for the players to defend in, and he actually does unbelievably well with this shot. He plays it really well. We couldn't, I don't think, ask any more of him, and he's a little bit unlucky then that the ball drops in the service box in the next shot. But these are the contact points that the players are going to have to deal with, and this is why it's so important that they are able to read the incoming flight and ball characteristics really quickly, because the more they can move back and the more quickly they can move back, the better their contact points can be and the more chance they have of being on balance. Okay, so quite extreme defense here for this size, physical size of player. He recovers well, and then he gets caught by the short ball, and of course there, if you have a look at him here, how small he is at the net. They're pretty vulnerable at this size and at this age at the net, and therefore the lob is easy. Should just point out as well, a nice little sporting reaction from him at the end. He tried really hard in this point, but it just didn't quite work for him. Okay, just moving on to the third of the short videos before we get into some of the progressions that I'd like to show you. Again, same theme. the pressure of defence on the green court. So this time it was a different return. The pressure this time was caused by direction, speed, okay, and taking the server some way out of court. If I just play it one more time, you'll see that he's out in the tram line, having to deal with that cross-court forehand return there. Okay, and he gets a little bit tangled up in it. He didn't receive that ball particularly well, but again, it just emphasizes the impact that the size of the court has. So this time it wasn't just the depth and the length of the court that was the challenge, but also the width, which therefore gave the returner the angles to be able to hit the forehand cross court. So these are all things that the players are going to have to work on, and you're going to have to be on their sides and really support these players as they progress to the green court. So those are three just very typical points that you will see on a very regular basis when you watch green ball competition with your players. So now I'm going to move on to having a look at different forms of defense very quickly. And in particular, I'm just going to emphasize one form of defense with a series of little videos which you might find interesting. So first of all, just going back to the ball characteristics, we need to think about the importance of height and depth to change trajectory. So it could be that the incoming ball is coming in fairly high and deep as well. So we're going to have to use height and depth to respond, to be able to prevent attack, or to be able to defend when under attack. Okay. So again, the ability of the defending player to master the ball characteristics on the outgoing ball are very important in defense as well as in attacking situations. It's also useful sometimes to defend by using direction. So it could be, for example, as you saw in the second video, the ball that was hit down the line. So directing the ball to what could be the weaker side, for a lot of players that may be the backhand side, is also quite effective defense. A lot of the time we would say go deep and down the middle to take away angles, but going to the weaker side could also be an option. But of course, remember that going to the weaker side is not only a shorter distance, so it gives a little bit less time, and it also makes for a more difficult recovery because they're going to have to go to the other side of the center of the court. So it is a possible option for defending, both when preventing attacking from the opponent, or even when attacking or counter-attacking from a defensive position, to go to the weaker side, perhaps to the backhand side. Thirdly, using slice from wide and or low positions. I think that if we think about the little boy in video 3, slice might have been a good option there for him. And I'm a big believer that we should encourage slice with the forehand and not just the backhand. I think it's useful for the players to work on all sorts of different skills with the continental grip. Of course, for the serve that we talked about in webinar 2, but also working on slice with the forehand also develops feel for the drop shot. It's also good for a change of tempo. It's also good for a change of different ball characteristics. And of course, to do that on the backhand as well. And of course, we know that even the pros, when they are forced out wide into very extreme defensive positions out wide, will use the slice to be able to return the ball, to give them a little bit more time in defensive situations. So slice from wide and or low positions is good when preventing attack or when defending under attack. And again, that would be a skill that I would encourage you to work on with your players at this level, to make sure that they start to develop the feel of the racket face to be able to create slice and not just always hitting with topspin, both on the backhand and on the forehand side. Again, if I just take you back to this chart, which I showed you in webinar 1, I've just modified it very slightly by putting some of this now in bold, because these are the things that the players are going to have to be able to do when defending. So they need to be able to read the incoming ball and react to the incoming ball. That's under the heading of the receiving skills. From a movement point of view, when attacking, they may have to move up the court towards the ball. When defending, they're going to have to move away from the incoming ball if moving backwards, and of course moving towards the ball if moving to defend from wider positions. And when I've put in brackets there the big area, what I mean by that is that they first need to recognize the importance and the need to move back, and they could then potentially use some precision steps to be able to find a better position if they have time. Quite often in defensive situations, there isn't time for the precision steps because they're under such extreme pressure. I also talked earlier about the importance of the stance, the width of the stance, and the fact that it's a good chance that they're going to have to load off the back foot when they get pushed back deep behind the baseline. So from a movement point of view, they have to be able to move well, they have to be able to move early, they have to be able to move backwards, they have to be able to find dynamic balance when moving backwards, and they have to be able to load up and play off the back foot in that extreme defense. Under the body skills again, looking at the bits that I've put in bold, the key thing here is the balance and the loading on the back foot. Okay, as I mentioned, the head is a factor in losing or maintaining balance, as is the width of the stance, but of course the body is moving backwards and therefore the balance is really going to be challenged. And from a racket point of view, of course, the action, the swing path, the racket face are important, but the key thing when defending is to make sure that we get the right mix of ball characteristics on the outgoing ball, either to neutralize or even when staying in the point, just to try and make sure that we prevent the opponent from either attacking again or from being able to hit a winner. And if we get the mix of ball characteristics right, then we can easily, or quite quickly rather, change defense into neutral or rally situations, or even better, switch directly from defense to attacking at the next shot. So just thought I'd show you that again so that you can think about how the receiving skills, movement skills, body skills, and racket skills relate to defensive situations. So now I'm going to move you on to oh no, I've got one more slide, sorry, before we get onto the videos. I've talked about the need and the importance of being able to read the incoming ball, okay, and to be able to get back in time or away from the middle of the court, moving backwards. So as well as reading the incoming ball characteristics, I've also talked in previous webinars about the idea of beating the bounce. So if you think about the bounce of the ball as being a moment in time, what we need to try to do is to get the players to make sure that they are in position before the ball is bouncing. And that's not always possible, but even if it's not actually possible to do, it's a great mindset or attitude to have, to challenge the players to be as close to being in position of where they want to be before the bounce of the ball. And I would also say the same thing with the recovery. So when they have hit their ball from a defensive position and the ball is going to bounce on the other side of the court, that they beat the bounce with their recovery so that they get back to their recovery position before the ball is bouncing on the other side. So even if it's not always possible from a time point of view, to emphasize that as a teaching point or as an attitude, I think is really important, because it creates a sense of urgency and a sense of priority in the speed of the movement. When we're moving backwards, the easiest way to move backwards first is with shuffle steps, side steps if you want to call them that. The problem is with sidestepping is that it isn't particularly fast. It may be that you find that you need to use more steps when you're sidestepping than when you cross over, but it is easier to perform and it requires a little bit less coordination. So when you're working on your footwork patterns or when you're working on your movement skills, I think that now, if they aren't able to do it already, is the time to develop the ability to cross over, not just recovering from wide positions with a crossover step, but also backward crossover steps from the baseline to defensive positions. And you'll see a little bit of that in the videos that I'm about to show you. So here we go with the first of the videos. So these are all a series of progressions to show how we can get our players to develop this skill of defending when pushed back with a deeper ball. Okay. On another occasion, we could look at what to do with a wide ball. This series of videos is simply about the players moving back to a deep defensive position to a high, deep bouncing ball. So we're actually going to start with a hand feed. So you can see the coach just past the service line there. He's going to feed the ball. The player is just slightly behind the baseline. And when we play the video here, you'll see that the coach is deliberately going to feed the ball behind the baseline to create that little bit of pressure with the movement. Okay, so here we go, and you can see that he's starting to use a crossover step. And what I quite like here is that he's getting into quite a wide position. Did you see how he lost his balance momentarily there as he was on his back foot? But he's starting to find a wide base from a crossover step as he's moving backwards. Let's see it one more time. Okay, he's not quite as close to the baseline that time, but again, we've got the crossover and he's trying to load up on that back foot. Okay, movement wasn't so good on that occasion. So if I just show it to you one more time there, okay, what I was talking about to do with beat the bounce, point one there that you can see in the white box, beat the bounce mentality on recovery, I would like this player to be back at that cone before the ball is in the coach's hands. Now, it's not always possible, but it's a good attitude to have, and it's a good thing to get the players to see the importance of quick recovery. Now, of course, it's also important that the players understand how they can give themselves a little bit more time to beat the bounce. So if they are smart, they will throw the ball back a little bit higher to give themselves a little bit more time for that recovery. So let's see what he does. Okay, he didn't throw the ball particularly well, and he wasn't particularly quick with his recovery either. So that would be definitely an area that I would want to work on with this player from a defensive point of view. So again, just a player, we've got the crossover. He's starting to find that wide base and the load on the back foot here. Okay, there's still work to do. These are not particularly easy situations for the players to work in, but they're really important. And this could be a really good warm-up exercise as well as a skill building exercise for your players. So that's step one. Okay, if I move on to the second one, please make sure that whatever you do with the forehand, you also replicate it with the backhand. First of all, because they're going to have to defend on the backhand side as well as the forehand, but also because sometimes we find that they are stronger moving in one direction or on one side than on the other. So it's really important that you make sure that there is the balance of the practice and that you focus on forehand and backhand with equal attention. So here we go with the backhand, same exercise here. Okay, and again we're working on that crossover, wide base, loading back foot. Okay, and then the idea is that he tries to beat the bounce on the way back in. Okay, and he's doing okay. This is quite new to him, and he's going to have to learn this quite quickly if he's going to play green ball matches, because this form of defense is very quickly going to become a real challenge for him if he doesn't adapt. So this is a little warm-up or a little skill building exercise just to get the players to work on that footwork pattern and just to understand the idea of moving backwards when defending. Then we're going to progress to the service line. Now, this could also be a warm-up or it could be another skill building exercise. And the importance here is that the coach is feeding quite a high loopy ball to round about the service line in a rally situation, okay? And the player just has to move back and be able to respond. So service box exercise, of course, we want to do this with the backhand as well, okay? So again, we've got the crossover starting to happen there. He's got to find that wide base, that wide loading position there, okay? And it's important that the coach is pushing the player back, okay? So let's have a look at it one more time. There we go, he's moving back a little bit. And again, we need to emphasize beating the bounce with that recovery to make sure that the point The point here is that the players have got to understand that they might have to switch very quickly from defense to neutral or defense even to attack. And if they're not quick with their recovery and they don't put enough importance on the recovery, then they will probably not be able to take some of those opportunities to either rally or even attack after a defensive opportunity. So that's the next stage. Okay, of course we need to do that on the back hand side as well. Then we move to the baseline. Now you can see here, I hope, a cone. We're looking at the boy in the yellow here, and you can see a cone here. Now this cone really is for the coach to aim for. Okay, and the idea here, we're going to look at this boy playing the backhand, and the idea here is that he learns to move in a closed drill. So this is about repetition. Okay, it's not always particularly realistic. And we also have to watch, because the players know that the deep ball is coming, that they recover to an accurate position every time. Because if they try and sneak back to a deeper recovery position back here, then not only the drill isn't realistic, but the players aren't learning either. So it's important that we get the detail of these drills right, and that the coach is also feeding realistic and well-timed balls. And you'll see here that the coach is not always doing that. But I'll play the video and we'll see what happens. So here we go. Okay, so that wasn't deep enough. It was a little wide. It wasn't deep enough. And again, not deep enough. So we're not putting the player under the required pressure. Now we've got it, and you can see how he's really working quite hard off that deeper ball. I'm going to play that one again for you to have a look at. Okay, in he comes. And actually he recovers quite well after he's played that deep ball. Okay, if I just go back to the beginning for a second, I want to just emphasize the coach from this point of view, because it is really important that we learn to create realistic situations. And too often I see coaches feeding the ball too nicely. And it really is important that we give our players a bit of tough love, especially in these situations where they're going to have to learn to defend. So it's important that we give them the types of balls that they're going to get in matches, but it's also important that the players learn to do the right thing. So there are a few things I want the players to do. First of all, I want them to make sure they start in a realistic position. Secondly, I want them to move back quickly, find that loaded position off a wide base deep behind the baseline. I want them to respond with the tactically appropriate high deep ball back. And I want them to be able to recover and look to beat the bounce with their recovery. So let's just have a look at all of those things all together. So first of all, we have a poor feed from the coach here, you'll see. Okay, not deep enough. Again, not deep enough. Okay, so this is the one here. Back he goes. Okay, and if you have a look there, he's in a pretty challenging position there. He's had to move back a long way, okay, and he's found that quite difficult. And if you have a look at the outgoing ball characteristics on this defensive ball, you'll see that the ball is nowhere near where we would want that ball to be from a defensive point of view. However, we have to give this boy credit for the effort that he's putting into his recovery. He's recovered pretty quickly after that deep ball. But I suspect that if he played that ball in a match, that point would have been over pretty quickly, because he hasn't quite yet got the ability to be able to find balance and control with his body from that deep position to then control the racket to get the height and the depth and possibly the direction that he needs when defending. Okay, if I show you one more, okay, again, poor feed there. All right, okay, so back he goes again. He's off camera. And again, if we have a look at the speed of his recovery, he's quick. Have a look again at where the ball is bouncing, not effective defense. So there's work to be done there, and this is why it's important to do these drills. One other thing just to stress is that the players are working physically really quite hard here. So short bursts with these drills are important, because the goal is not to tire them out too much. The goal is to look for quality first rather than quantity, and to make sure that the players are actually learning what they need to do in these defensive situations. Okay, so I'm going to move it on now to the next progression. Again, we go back to the boy that you saw a moment ago on the service line. Okay, and let's have a look at what's going on here. Okay, so this time the player is getting a rally ball first, and then they are getting a defensive ball. Okay, so this is a little bit less of a closed drill. I think the instruction from memory to the coach was that they could feed the defensive ball either to the forehand or the backhand. So the player knows they're going to get a rally ball first, and then they know that they're going to get a defensive ball or a defending ball, but they just don't know which side it's going to come to. So it's still an element of being a closed drill, but there is now a little bit more unpredictability to it. And this is important because the players have got to learn to recognize the incoming ball characteristics for the defending ball so that they can move quickly enough to get into the best possible position to play an effective defense. So again, he moves back. Again, poor defense. Ball is landing too short, not enough height, not enough depth on it. Let's see it one more time. The rally ball here.
Thank you.
Okay, the recovery. Okay, then he goes back. Okay, not bad in the defending there. Okay, but poor with the forehand defense. Okay, so there's work to do with all these players, but I think it's quite interesting sometimes to watch players who are not perfect at everything they do, because these are the players that we have to work with every day, right? So, you know, this is like real world, if you like. Okay, so just a couple of things to finish off with before we wrap up for this third webinar. I talked earlier about the mental dimension, and I just want to come back to that for a moment very quickly. So until this stage in their career at red and at orange, defending probably has not been a big part of the game for them. And so they're going to have to learn to be mentally prepared to work hard. They're going to have to be mentally prepared to play shots that aren't going to allow them to win the point. They're going to have to be prepared sometimes to be patient. And all of these are tough lessons which the players are going to have to learn when they come to the green court, because they are not going to be able to rally and attack the whole time. In fact, if you look at the heat maps that I showed you earlier, there's an awful lot of defending to be done. And that's an important consideration from a mental point of view, as well as physically, tactically, and technically. So the players have got to learn to be resilient. They've got to learn to be patient. They've got to understand why it's important to neutralize or to stay in the point, and the difference between them and how they can do it. Okay, and hopefully the drills that I've just showed you there give you some sort of an idea of how you might structure a neutralizing practice for a deep ball, either with the forehand or with the backhand. I also just want to touch again on this quick transition. I talked about it earlier, and I think it's really important that the players don't just think about what to do with the incoming ball characteristics and recognizing that they're going to have to move back quickly. But I think it's really important that they start to learn about the effectiveness of the outgoing ball. And a good analogy or example I might give here is if you think about a boxer in the boxing ring. Okay, if we're punching our opponent on the chin and or on the side of the head for that matter, and the opponent is being pushed back against the ropes, then the attacking boxer has to recognize that the opponent is in trouble. And we need to do this on the tennis court as well. So the players need to learn that defense can very quickly become another defensive shot, okay? Because it could be that they have to defend deep, defend wide. Any combination of defense is quite possible, okay? It could be that they go from a defensive to a neutral position very quickly in one shot, or it could be that they defend either very well or that the opponent plays a poor shot, and therefore the transition is from defense to attack. So that then has an impact on the not just the speed of the recovery, but also the position of the recovery. And it's really important that we practice drills where they don't just always recover to the same position, but that they also go from defense to attacking or neutral positions too. So the players have got to recognize when they've defended well, and they've got to be able to be ready for a quick transition for a different phase of play. And finally, the speed and the positioning of the recovery becomes important. And this is why I love this idea of beating the bounce. If that's something new for you as a concept, you might want to take that away and think about how you can use that. But the importance of the speed of the recovery as well as the location of the recovery is really important, because if the players don't recover inside the baseline to capitalize on an attacking position, if they're not very quick at doing that, then actually it could be that because they didn't recover quickly enough, they end up having to play a rally ball. Whereas if they'd recovered more quickly from that defensive shot, they may be able to turn defense straight into attack. So please talk about and work on the speed as well as the positioning of the recovery with your players. Really important in these situations. So just to conclude for webinar 3, make sure that your players understand why defense is so important on the green court, and make sure that you understand why it's important too. Not just deep balls, which I've shown you, but also think about what you can do to take these principles and apply them with wide defense as well. Make sure that you create tough but realistic defensive situations for your players. Players cannot always have easy balls, and I think it's really important that you create tough but realistic defensive situations, and that will help them to develop the tactical and the technical, the physical and the mental dimensions and resilience to be able to defend when needed. So we have to replicate in practice and in training the things that happen in the match. If what happens in training is completely different to what happens in the match, then I would suggest that it's probably not very effective training. So try to recreate match situations in your lessons so that the players start to recognize what to do when they get that same situation in a match. Remember to practice transition from defense to other phases of play. As I've already said a few times, a defensive situation can very quickly change to an attacking opportunity in one ball. So it's not just where to recover to, but also to make sure that they recover quickly, ready for what may come next after the defending. So that's it for webinar 3. I hope you've enjoyed it, and perhaps more importantly, I hope you've found it useful. I hope that there are some things that you can take away and think about for your coaching with your green ball players. And also think about it in terms of what this means for when you progress some of your orange ball players, knowing that they're going to be under some pressure when they move to the bigger green court. Remember that increase in the court area from the orange court to the green court is quite significant. As always, look out for an email from me in the next day or two with the task sheet, which will have some other simple questions for you to think about, for you to maybe expand your thinking or to challenge your coaching a little bit, or maybe just to reflect on some of the things that we've talked about. And as always, if you have any questions, you have my email address there. Feel free, please, to email me and to ask any questions that you might have, not just about webinar 3, but also about webinar 1 and 2. I've had a few questions from some of you, and it's great to receive those. And I've had some good dialogue, not just by email, but also through our Facebook group about some of the videos and some of the points that I've made in the webinar. So please do feel free to keep asking questions. And if you've got anything that you want further learning on, then please ask, and I'll do my very best to help you. So thank you for attending again. I hope you enjoyed it and that you found it useful. And I will see you again for the final webinar just before Christmas, for those of you that celebrate Christmas, on the 23rd of December at 6 p.m. And remember, that's 6 p.m. London time that we will be going live. So depending where in the world you are, please make sure that you check the clocks and you check the time difference. Of course, it will be recorded, so if you're not able to attend on the 23rd because it is very close to Christmas and some of you will be on holiday, it will be available on YouTube with the other 3 webinars, so you'll be able to watch them all over again in your own time. So thank you very much. Good luck with your coaching, with your green ball defending, and see you again soon.